Welcome to Grow to Glow.
In my last video, we talked about why trying to build confidence by doing more confidence-building activities actually backfires. We discovered that confident people don't do more. They stop doing the things that chip away at their confidence, like constant mirror checking, mental rehearsing, seeking permission, and comparing themselves to others. But here's the follow-up question I got by others dozens of times. Okay, but what about self-love? Isn't that supposed to help with confidence and self-worth? And here's a truth bomb that might make you uncomfortable. Most of what we call self-love is actually self-rejection in disguise. I'm talking about standing in front of the mirror forcing yourself to say, "I am beautiful," when every fiber of your being is screaming, "No, you're not." Or repeating affirmations about being worthy when your brain immediately starts listing all the reasons why you're not. You think you're practicing self-love, but what you're actually doing is having an argument with yourself. And guess who's winning that argument? In the next few minutes, I'll show you exactly why traditional self-love advice keeps you stuck in a cycle of trying to convince yourself you're enough, and what actually works for building genuine self-worth that doesn't require daily maintenance. Reply with fire if you've ever tried to love yourself more and ended up feeling worse about yourself. You're definitely not alone in this. Let me paint you a picture. Sarah downloads a self-love app that sends her daily affirmations. Every morning, she looks in the mirror and says, "I am worthy. I am enough. I love myself exactly as I am." But here's what's actually happening in her head. I am worthy, but what about that mistake I made at work yesterday? I am enough, except I really should lose those 10 pounds. I love myself exactly as I am, but why can't I be more like my sister who has her life together? By the end of her self-love practice, Sarah feels worse about herself than when she started. Sound familiar? If this sounds like you, you're not alone. Because here's what nobody tells you about the self-love movement. It's built on a fundamental misunderstanding of how the human mind works. We've been told that the path to self-worth is through self-love. That if we just tell ourselves we're amazing enough times, we'll eventually believe it. But that's like trying to convince someone who's afraid of dogs that dogs are friendly by shouting, "Dogs are nice," while a German shepherd is barking at them. The problem isn't that you don't love yourself enough. The problem is that you're at war with yourself, and you're trying to win that war by fighting harder. What if I told you that the most self-loving people I know never think about self-love? They're too busy living their lives to spend time convincing themselves they're worthy of living them. This is Grow to Glow, where we dive deep into the psychology of personal growth, emotional intelligence, and building relationships that actually work, starting with the one you have with yourself. Later in this video, I'm going to share the mindset shift that freed me from the exhausting cycle of trying to love myself more. It's counterintuitive, but it's the difference between performing self-acceptance and actually experiencing it. But first, we need to understand why all this self-love advice is keeping you stuck. So why does trying to love yourself more end up making you feel worse about yourself? It comes down to something psychologists call cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is what happens when you try to hold two conflicting beliefs at the same time. When you tell yourself, "I love myself," while simultaneously believing, "I'm not good enough," your brain experiences this as stress. And to resolve that stress, it usually defaults to the belief that feels more true, which is often the negative one. Dr. Kristin Neff's groundbreaking research at the University of Texas reveals something fascinating. Self-compassion, not self-love, is what actually creates lasting self-worth. The difference is crucial. Self-love says, "I'm amazing just the way I am." Self-compassion says, "I'm human, and humans are imperfect, and that's okay." Think of it like this. Self-love is like trying to convince yourself you're a perfect driver while your crashes into a tree. Self-compassion is like saying, "Yeah, I crashed into a tree. That happens sometimes. What can I learn from this?" Here's the deeper issue. When we focus on loving ourselves, we're still making our worth conditional. We're saying, "I need to feel love for myself in order to be okay." But what happens on the days when you don't feel love for yourself? Are you suddenly not worthy? Dr. Tara Brach, a psychologist and meditation teacher, calls this the trance of unworthiness, We get so caught up in trying to prove to ourselves that we're worthy that we never actually question whether worthiness is something that needs to be earned in the first place. It's like spending your whole life trying to win a game without realizing you made up the rules. You're running a race that doesn't exist. Your brain's default mode network, the part that's active when you're not focused on anything specific, is constantly running this background program that evaluates whether you're okay or not. When you practice self-love, you're feeding that program more data to analyze. You're keeping the evaluation system running. Coming up, 4 ways you can start shifting this, starting today. Alright, so if self-love keeps us stuck in the evaluation game, what actually works? Here are 4 shifts that will change everything. Step 1. Replace self-love with self-neutrality. This might sound boring, but hear me out. Instead of trying to love yourself, aim for neutrality. Think of how you feel about your elbow. You don't love your elbow, you don't hate your elbow, it's just your elbow, and it does its job. What if you could feel that way about yourself? Not constantly evaluating whether you're amazing or terrible, just existing as a human who's figuring things out. You might try this. When you catch yourself in either self-criticism or forced self-love, just say, I'm a human having a human experience. That's it. No judgment, no evaluation, just acknowledgement. The goal isn't to think you're the best. The goal is to stop thinking about whether you're the best or worst and just get on with your life. Step 2. Practice curious observation. Instead of fighting your negative thoughts or trying to replace them with positive ones, get curious about them. When that voice says, you're not good enough, don't argue with it or try to convince it otherwise. Just notice it. You might say, oh, there's that not good enough thought again. Interesting. I wonder what triggered that. Dr. Dan Siegel calls this, name it to tame it. When you observe your thoughts without getting caught up in them, you create space between you and the thought. You realize you are not your thoughts, you're the one observing them. You might try this. For 1 week, instead of challenging negative self-talk, just notice it like you're a scientist studying your own mind. The subject is having self-critical thoughts. How fascinating. Step 3. Focus on function over form. This is huge. Instead of asking, do I love myself? Ask, am I functioning well in my life? Are you showing up for the people you care about? Are you taking care of your basic needs? Are you growing and learning? Genuine self-worth comes from evidence, not affirmations. When you act in ways that align with your values, your brain doesn't need to be convinced you're worthy, it has proof. Think about the people you most respect. Do you respect them because they love themselves, or because of how they show up in the world? You might try this. Instead of morning affirmations, make a list of 3 ways you can show up well today. Then do them. Let your actions build your worth, not your words. Step 4. Embrace your ordinariness. This might be the most radical one. What if instead of trying to be special, you embraced being ordinary? What if you're not supposed to be extraordinary at everything? The pressure to be amazing at everything is exhausting. What if you're just a regular person doing your best with what you've got? What if that's not just okay, but actually beautiful? When you stop trying to be special, you stop having to defend your specialness. You can just exist without constantly proving your worth. You might try this. When you catch yourself trying to impress someone or prove how great you are, pause and ask, what if I just showed up as a normal person? What would that look like? Before we wrap up, let's bring it all together and talk about what this really means for your life. Let's bring this home. We've talked about why self-love often backfires. It keeps us trapped in the evaluation game, constantly trying to convince ourselves we're worthy instead of just living like we already are. The 4 shifts we covered, self-neutrality, curious observation, focusing on function, and embracing ordinariness. They work because they get you out of the relationship business with yourself and into the living business. When you practice self-neutrality, you stop wasting energy on the, am I good enough? question. When you observe your thoughts curiously, you realize you don't have to believe everything you think. When you focus on function over form, your actions build evidence of your worth. And when you embrace your ordinariness, you free yourself from the exhausting pressure to be special. Here's what I want you to understand. You don't need to love yourself to live a good life. You just need to stop being at war with yourself. The most content people I know aren't constantly thinking about their self-worth. They're too busy being useful, being kind, being present. Their worth isn't a question that needs answering, it's a given that allows them to focus on what actually matters. I spent years trying to love myself more, thinking that was the key to confidence and happiness. But the real shift happened when I realized I don't need to have an opinion about myself at all. I can just exist and contribute and connect without constantly evaluating whether I'm doing it right. You are not a problem to be solved or a project to be improved. You're a human being having a human experience, and that's inherently valuable, not because you're special, but because existence itself is remarkable. So here's my question for you. Which of these 4 shifts feels most challenging but also most freeing? Self-neutrality, curious observation, focusing on function, or embracing ordinariness? Drop a comment and let me know. I read every single one and I'm genuinely curious about your experience. If this video shifted how you think about self-worth, do me a favor and hit that like button. And if you know someone who's stuck in the self-love struggle, share this with them. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do is help someone stop trying so hard to love themselves. If you want to explore more about building genuine confidence without the performance, check out my video on the confidence paradox. Why trying less gets you more? I'll link it right up here. Thanks for being part of this conversation, and remember, grow wiser, glow brighter.
Like, subscribed and add alert, grow and glow every day.